For years, the United States has built big important buildings called embassies in countries all over the world. These embassies are like grown-up friendship bracelets. They're places where people from both countries talk, solve problems, and show they care about working together. But now, under a new plan led by President Donald Trump, with help from businessman Elon Musk, the US wants to take off a bunch of those bracelets. In fact, they're thinking about shutting down as many as 27 embassy offices around the world. And guess what? A lot of them are in Africa. However, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has made a concerning statement regarding an issue like this. Why? What's the real reason behind this? Is it about saving money, cutting ties, sending a message? And more importantly, should African countries be upset, or should they be proud? What if losing these embassies isn't a loss at all, but a sign that it's time to grow up, build new kinds of friendships, or stand stronger on their own? And here's the twist nobody's talking about. What if these embassy closures are just the tip of the iceberg, and there's a much bigger, quieter plan happening behind the scenes? The news hit like thunder on a quiet afternoon. One big announcement, and suddenly people across Africa and America were talking. In government halls, on the radio, in living rooms and around dinner tables, the same sentence echoed. The US government is planning to shut down embassies. And guess what? Africa is at the top of the list. Yes, Africa. America is now considering closing 27 embassies, and many of them are on African soil. But this isn't just some wild idea that came out of nowhere. It's part of a bigger plan by President Donald Trump, his mission to make the American government leaner and more efficient. And surprisingly, he's getting support from none other than Elon Musk, the guy behind Tesla and SpaceX. Some people even say the idea of cutting back on embassies might have come directly from Musk himself. So which countries are at risk? According to early reports, the US may shut down its embassies in the Central African Republic, Lesotho, and South Sudan. They're also thinking about closing the US consulate in South Africa. Now, if you look at a map, these might not be the biggest countries in Africa, not like Nigeria or Egypt, but each one is home to millions of people and represents years of diplomatic friendship with the US. But this isn't just about Africa. The plan includes shutting embassies in some small, poorer countries in Europe too. And it's not just full closures. The US might shrink its staff in places like Iraq, where they've spent years trying to help with terrorism and rebuilding. This has experts worried. They say fewer embassies could mean less support in times of trouble, weaker relationships, and slower help when problems arise. To really understand what's going on, you need to zoom out and look at the whole world. Did you know the United States has about 750 military bases around the globe? That's more than any other country, by far. If you marked all those bases on a world map, it would look like someone sprinkled stars across every continent. That's how big America's footprint is. Now, just a short time ago, a powerful American general named General Langley gave a speech. He talked about a part of Africa called the Sahel, and specifically mentioned Burkina Faso. He warned that African countries were getting a little too close to Russia and China. His message? That America should hold on to its presence there, because, in his view, Russia and China are not good for African nations like Burkina Faso and Mali. And almost like clockwork, right after these warnings, the US starts talking about closing embassies. So, what's really going on? Is this just about saving money? Or is it part of a much bigger chess game? One where countries like the US, China, and Russia are quietly moving their pieces on the global board. And how does this affect the people? Well, the first and biggest impact will be felt by regular Africans, especially those who want to travel to America. Without nearby embassies, getting a visa becomes a lot harder and expensive. Let's break it down. A US tourist visa already costs about $185. That's a lot for most people. But if your local US embassy closes, you'll now have to travel to another country just to apply. That means spending even more on plane tickets, hotels, food and transportation before you even know if your visa will be approved. For many African families, that's just too expensive. The dream of visiting America, gone. And yet, maybe, just maybe, this moment isn't a setback. Maybe it's a signal, a chance to rethink things. Maybe closing these embassies isn't the end of a friendship, but the beginning of a new chapter. What if it's not a punishment, but a hidden opportunity? Let's slow down for a moment and ask something important. Why do so many Africans dream of going to America? Well, imagine growing up in a world where nearly everything exciting, superheroes, music stars, sports legends, comes from one magical place called America. That's what it's like for many African kids. From a young age, they're surrounded by American movies, American music, and American dreams. They see big smiles, fast cars, shiny buildings, and people who always seem to win. Think about it. Batman, American, Superman, American, Spider-Man, yup, American, and the stars, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Michael Jordan, Beyoncé, all American, all larger than life. Their stories travel across oceans and into living rooms and phones everywhere. It's like the world's longest, loudest commercial, one that says, "Come to America." That's where dreams come true. For many young Africans, going to America becomes more than just a trip. It feels like a life mission, something they must do to feel like they've made it. Just like Muslims dream of visiting Mecca, some Africans see visiting the US as a badge of honor. I mean, I was one of them. I used to dream of America too. And who could blame them? When every movie and every song tells you the best people, the smartest people, the coolest people all come from one place, it's easy to start believing that that place must be better, that the people there must somehow be more. That's what happened to me, until I actually went to the United States. Because reality is different from the movie screen. In real life, there are smart people and not so smart people everywhere. There are kind people and rude people in every country. There are beautiful places and ugly parts everywhere, even in America. And slowly, more and more Africans are starting to see that you don't need to chase a dream across the ocean to live a good life. A good life starts with having enough. Enough food, a comfortable home, clean sheets, and a bit of peace. The better life is not necessarily in the United States. You can have a good life where you are, if you have some funding, if you have money. You see, happiness doesn't belong to any one country. It belongs to people who build a life they enjoy. And Africa is still wide open, full of promise, full of room to build. Our countries are the most beautiful places with the best opportunities, because they're still brand new, still open. It's like a white sheet, like a big piece of paper where you can write whatever you want to write. That's something special. While America has already built its roads, its systems, its skyscrapers, Africa still has space to dream, design, and define its own future. Young Africans don't have to just fit into the world, they can shape it. But here's the problem. This message gets drowned out, buried under American movies, American songs, and now American politics. Because with the US talking about closing embassies, many Africans hear something louder than a door shutting. They hear, "I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not talking to you because I want you to feel the pain when I stop." Or, "I'm cutting you off. If you do nonsense, I cut people off." It's like being in a friendship where one person always threatens to leave if they don't get their way. It's not really friendship at that point. It's power. It sends a message. I'm more important than you. You need me more than I need you. But here's a question. What if that's not true? What if Africa doesn't need America as much as America thinks it does? What if closing those embassies isn't the punishment it was meant to be? What if it's actually a new beginning? While President Trump is planning to pull America back from Africa, another voice is rising, and it's coming from the heart of the continent. That voice belongs to Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a young military leader from Burkina Faso. He didn't come into power the usual way. In September 2022, after a military takeover, Traoré became the country's leader. But instead of promising foreign aid or asking for handouts like many leaders do, he's been saying something very different. He's telling Africans, we don't need to wait for help. We have what we need. We just have to believe in ourselves. His speeches feel more like wake-up calls. He talks with fire and passion, telling people it's time to stop relying on outsiders to build Africa's future. And that message, it's catching on, especially with young people who are tired of seeing Africa always painted as poor, weak, or needy. In one recent speech that spread like wildfire on social media, Captain Traoré looked beyond his country's borders. He spoke directly to Africans living abroad, those who left to study, to work, to build better lives. "Come home," he said. "Come back and help us build. We need you." He didn't say Africa should close its doors to the world, but he made it clear. Africa doesn't need to sit and wait for help. It has the people, it has the minerals, it has the land, it has the power to stand on its own. And here's where things get interesting. While the US is thinking about closing its embassies, Captain Traoré and others like him might not see it as a loss. They might actually see it as a chance for more freedom. Because embassies aren't just buildings with flags, they're also tools used to spread influence. American embassies help American businesses. They keep an eye on politics. They make sure things stay friendly toward US interests. In many ways, they're a kind of control centre. And when you look at which African countries are facing embassy closures, a pattern starts to appear. In the Central African Republic, Russian advisors are on the ground. Russian companies are digging for minerals. In South Sudan, even after receiving lots of US aid, leaders are growing closer to China and Russia. Lesotho, a small country, has been working on a deal with the US about exporting denim jeans. But there's been friction, especially around who controls the money and resources. And in South Africa, debates over land and the economy are creating tension, both inside the country and with the outside world. So what's really going on here? Some say this isn't just about saving money, it's about sending a message. If you keep getting too close to Russia or China, we're out. It's a form of pressure, a warning, dressed up as budget cuts. But Traoré doesn't think Africa should be caught in the middle of a fight between big powers. "We're not against any partner," he says. "We just want partnerships that respect our sovereignty, that help us grow without hidden agendas." And maybe, just maybe, he's right. What if these embassy closures aren't a punishment, but a door swinging open? What if they force Africa to rely more on its own people and less on foreign help? What if fewer US visas means more brilliant Africans stay home, invest in local businesses, teach in local schools, and build dreams right where they were born? What if Africa isn't something that needs to be fixed or developed in a Western way, but something the world desperately needs to learn from? With the youngest population on Earth, rich cultures and resources that power the planet, maybe Africa's strength isn't something to be shaped by others. Maybe it's something that's about to reshape the world. If this story has stirred something in you, even just a little, then don't scroll past without doing your part. Hit that like button to show you're not one of the silent ones. Subscribe to The New Tourist if you believe these truths deserve to be heard, not buried. And don't keep this to yourself. Share this video with someone who still thinks they understand Africa. Because if we stay quiet, we're no better than those who run to Europe and America without even trying back home. We're no better than those African leaders, the greedy ones who enrich themselves while their people wallow in excruciating hunger. Now let's get back to the story. Africa has some treasures you just can't find anywhere else. Think about the animals first. Giraffes stretching their long necks toward the sky, hippos splashing in muddy rivers, lions roaring across the savannah, and elephants marching with power and pride. These amazing creatures are a big reason tourists from all over the world, including many Americans, travel thousands of miles and spend thousands of dollars just to go on African safaris. That's why Americans come to Africa, to go on safaris and have that experience. But Africa's treasures don't stop with wildlife. There's much, much more. Africa is home to more than 3,000 different ethnic groups and over 2,000 languages. That's more cultures and traditions than you can imagine. And it all lives on one continent. Africa also has the youngest population in the world. About 60% of Africans are under the age of 25. In a world where many countries are getting older and struggling to find enough young workers, Africa is like a field full of seeds, full of future doctors, engineers, artists and leaders. And what about the ground itself? Africa holds about 30% of the Earth's remaining mineral resources, including 90% of platinum, 50% of gold, and many of the rare minerals needed to build solar panels, electric car batteries, and clean energy tools. These aren't just shiny rocks, these are the materials that will power the world's future. But Africa has something even more powerful than minerals, animals, or youth. Africa has freedom. Not just political freedom, but the freedom to create new ideas from scratch. In many parts of the world, people are stuck inside old systems, doing things the way it's always been done. But in Africa, those old systems don't always exist, so people can skip the old ways and build something better. Look at mobile banking. While Americans were still writing checks and slowly switching to debit cards, people in Kenya came up with something bold: M-Pesa. It allowed people without bank accounts to send and receive money using nothing but a simple mobile phone. No need for a credit card, no need for a fancy bank. Just a smart solution made for real people with real needs. That idea didn't come from America, it came from Africa. And similar things are happening in healthcare, education, farming, and clean energy. Not by copying Western ideas, but by solving African problems with African creativity. Africans have direct access to their resources, their talents, and their future. They just have to reach out and grab it. And maybe, just maybe, the closing of American embassies will speed that up. With fewer people looking for ways to leave and move to the US, maybe more bright, brilliant Africans will focus on building here, at home. Not because they're trapped, but because they finally realise that their home is worth building. Now let's be clear, Africa doesn't need to isolate itself. The world is better when we share ideas and learn from one another. But those connections should feel like partnerships, not like one side is the boss and the other just follows. Because when Trump says he's closing embassies, he's acting like America is offering something no one else can give. But what if that's not true? What if Africa has just as much to offer the world? Just different things. I mean, why are you worried that Trump says he's going to close his embassy? Where are you going to find giraffes in America? There are no giraffes. It's a joke, but it lands with truth. Africa doesn't need to prove itself by America's standards. It has its own treasures, its own culture, and its own way forward. And maybe, just maybe, the world is finally ready to see that. To understand what's really happening with these embassy closures, we need to zoom out and look at the bigger geopolitical picture. The world is changing rapidly, with new powers rising and old alliances shifting. For decades after World War II, the United States was the undisputed leader of the free world, with only the Soviet Union as a serious rival. After the Soviet collapse in 1991, America enjoyed about 20 years as the world's only superpower, what some called a unipolar moment. But that moment has passed. China has risen to become the world's second largest economy and is expanding its influence globally, particularly in Africa, through its Belt and Road Initiative. Russia, though economically smaller, has reasserted itself militarily and diplomatically, building new partnerships in Africa, the Middle East and elsewhere. Other regional powers are also emerging: India, Brazil, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, creating a more complex multipolar world where America can no longer simply dictate terms. Africa has become a key battleground in this new global competition. The continent's vast resources, growing consumer markets, young workforce, and 54 UN votes make it strategically valuable to all major powers. China has been particularly active, becoming Africa's largest trading partner and a major investor in infrastructure projects across the continent. Russia has expanded its presence through security agreements, mining deals, and cultural diplomacy. European nations maintain strong ties through post-colonial relationships and development aid. Against this backdrop, Trump's plan to close embassies looks less like simple budget cutting and more like a strategic repositioning. Consider what happened in Iraq. When Iraq asked American forces to leave, Trump didn't simply comply. Instead, he demanded payment. If you want us to leave, you need to pay us our money back. The money we spent to build this embassy. At some point, we want to get out, but this isn't the right point. The other thing is, if we do get out, we've spent a tremendous amount of money on building airports and it's one of the largest embassies we have in the world, Mike, and we want to be reimbursed for the various costs that we have had. This approach treats international relationships like business deals, where everything has a price tag. It's transactional diplomacy. What can you give me in return for my presence? Now, the same administration is saying they need to remove people from dangerous places like Somalia and Iraq. But America chose to go to these places. They weren't invited. That wasn't Somalians in America. That was an American flight in Somalia. Same for Iraq. Iraq didn't go to America. America went to Iraq. So what's the real story behind these embassy closures? It appears to be a combination of factors. By threatening to close embassies, the US puts pressure on countries to align more closely with American interests and reduce ties with rivals like Russia and China. Also, the US may be consolidating its diplomatic presence, focusing on countries it considers strategically important while reducing costs elsewhere. One factor is domestic politics. Trump's base responds well to messages about cutting foreign spending and focusing on America First policies. This could also be Trump's idea of negotiating better terms. The threat of closure creates bargaining power for extracting better deals, whether on trade, military access, or other priorities. Examining the specific countries targeted reveals these motives more clearly. Central African Republic. They're closing the embassy because the Central African Republic is a great friend of Russia. They're very close to Russia. So it's like, okay, if you don't dim your friendship down with Russia, we are leaving. That's what it is. Lesotho has a deal. They're working out a deal with the US. They produce denim jeans, okay? And they forced Elon Musk to pay 30% of the value of his company before he opens. So they're trying to put pressure so they can open up and they can just shut up forever for everything else. South Sudan, same situation. There's a bunch of people that are pro-Russian. Other people are Western. It's the same situation. South Africa, there's a lot of operations in South Africa right now, so South Africa can allow white people to have land. These closures aren't random. They're targeted moves in a complex global game, using diplomatic presence as both carrot and stick to achieve broader goals. But the question remains, will these tactics work? Or will they backfire, pushing African nations further into partnerships with China, Russia, and other powers that don't make their support conditional on political alignment? Despite the tough talk and pressure tactics, there's one fundamental truth that even Trump's administration can't escape. In today's interconnected world, no country, not even the United States, can thrive in isolation. The reason why people look for money today is because they want to be situated somewhere within a society, within a community. That's why you work hard. You work hard so you can be on the higher side of the spectrum in a society. If you were to live alone in this world, you wouldn't care about Ferraris. You wouldn't care about private jets. I'm telling you, you would not care about that. The reason why you care about that is because you want to have a community. This insight applies to nations as well as individuals. Countries seek wealth, power, and status, largely because these things position them advantageously within the global community. A Ferrari is worthless if there are no roads to drive it on and no one to be impressed by it. Similarly, American power means little without the global system that recognizes and responds to that power. And the US cannot survive on its own. It's not possible. They need partnerships. They need friendships with other countries. This reality suggests that the current threats about embassy closures and tariffs are likely temporary pressure tactics rather than permanent policies. And these tariffs and embassies? It's just pressure. It's just pressure. Trump himself acknowledges this dynamic when discussing Iraq. But eventually we want to be able to let Iraq run its own affairs. And that's very important. So at some point we want to get out. But this isn't the right point. The timing and conditions matter. America wants to extract maximum value from its relationships before changing them, whether that's financial reimbursement, political concessions, or strategic advantages. This approach to international relations resembles a business negotiation more than traditional diplomacy. It's about leverage and deals rather than values and alliances. When Trump announced reciprocal tariffs, he put it in the simplest possible terms. In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. Reciprocal. That means they do it to us and we do it to them. Very simple. Can't get any simpler than that. Trust me. But international relationships are rarely that simple. They involve complex histories, multiple stakeholders, and competing interests that can't be reduced to straightforward transactions. For African nations facing potential embassy closures, this new reality presents both challenges and opportunities. Without nearby US embassies, visa processes become more difficult and expensive. Cultural and educational exchanges may diminish. Direct channels for communication with American officials become more limited. However, reduced American presence might create space for more balanced relationships with multiple global partners. It could accelerate the development of intra-African connections and institutions. It might even encourage greater self-reliance, as Captain Traoré has advocated. Perhaps the most important question for Africans isn't whether America will close its embassies, but how African nations will respond to this changing landscape. Will they simply seek replacements for American patronage from China or Russia? Or will they use this moment to reshape their place in the global community, demanding mutual respect and benefit from all international partners? So should you start crying because America's closing embassies in Africa? The answer depends entirely on how you view the relationship between Africa and America. If you believe that America's presence is essential for Africa's development and security, embassy closures might seem like abandonment, a reason for tears and concern. But if you believe, like Captain Traoré, that Africa must chart its own course and rely on its own strength, these closures might actually be a blessing in disguise, a reason for celebration. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. International connections matter. They facilitate trade, cultural exchange, knowledge transfer, and diplomatic cooperation on global challenges like climate change, terrorism, and public health. Complete isolation isn't the answer for any nation, but these connections should be balanced and mutually beneficial. They shouldn't create dependency or undermine sovereignty. When one side can threaten to cut off the other as punishment, the relationship isn't healthy. Many African leaders and citizens are increasingly questioning the traditional models of international engagement that have prevailed since independence. They're asking why their resource-rich countries remain poor while former colonial powers continue to profit from African minerals, agriculture, and markets. They're wondering why they should align with distant powers in geopolitical contests that have little relevance to everyday African lives. This questioning isn't about choosing one foreign patron over another, replacing American influence with Chinese or Russian influence. It's about redefining what international partnerships look like altogether. What if, instead of seeing Africa as a place to be developed according to Western models, the world recognized Africa as a source of innovation and new approaches to global challenges? What if, instead of conditioning aid on political alignment, international partners invested in African initiatives and priorities defined by Africans themselves? Captain Traoré's speeches reflect this shifting mindset. Africa doesn't need saviours, it needs fair partnerships and the space to develop its own solutions. The potential closure of American embassies, while creating practical difficulties, might accelerate this mental decolonization. Without the easy path of emigration to America, more talented Africans might redirect their energy toward building opportunities at home. Without American diplomats in every capital promoting American interests, African nations might feel more freedom to pursue policies that benefit their own citizens first. This doesn't mean rejecting America or embracing its rivals. It means approaching all international relationships with the same question: how does this serve our people's needs and aspirations? Africa offers experiences and opportunities that can't be found in America or anywhere else. From its unique wildlife to its thousands of cultures and languages, from its young, energetic population to its vast, untapped resources, Africa has treasures that make it special. In Africa, you can ride the giraffe. Africa has unique gifts to offer the world, and these gifts don't depend on American approval or American embassies. As African nations navigate this changing diplomatic landscape, they face a choice. Will they define themselves by their relationships with global powers, competing for foreign favour and investment? Or will they define themselves by their own values, resources and aspirations, engaging with the world on their own terms? The answer to that question will determine whether embassy closures are merely another chapter in Africa's long history of external intervention, or the beginning of a new story written by Africans themselves. As we think about what might happen next, it's important to look beyond the immediate issue of embassy closures to the bigger trends shaping Africa's future. Africa is experiencing remarkable changes that could transform its place in the world. Regardless of American diplomatic presence, Africa's population is booming. By 2050, 1 in 4 people on Earth will be African. While Europe, East Asia, and North America face aging populations and declining birth rates, Africa has the world's youngest population. This demographic dividend could fuel tremendous economic growth if these young people find productive opportunities. Technology is changing the game. Mobile phones have already revolutionized banking, healthcare, and education across Africa. New technologies like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and 3D printing could allow African countries to leapfrog older industrial models and build more sustainable economies. African unity is growing stronger. The African Continental Free Trade Area, launched in 2021, is creating the world's largest free trade area by connecting 1.3 billion people across 54 countries. This could dramatically boost intra-African trade and reduce dependency on foreign markets. Climate change is forcing innovation. As one of the regions most vulnerable to climate impacts, Africa faces urgent pressure to develop sustainable solutions for agriculture, water management, and energy. These innovations could position Africa as a leader in green technology. New partnerships are emerging. Beyond the traditional Western powers and new players like China and Russia, Africa is building relationships with countries like Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, India and Brazil, creating more options and reducing dependency on any single partner. Against this backdrop, American embassy closures might be a temporary setback, but not a decisive factor in Africa's development. In fact, they might accelerate some positive trends by pushing African nations to diversify their international relationships and invest more in regional cooperation. For everyday Africans, especially young people with dreams of America, the message is clear. Your talent, energy, and ambition are needed at home. The opportunities in Africa to build businesses, solve problems, create art, and shape society are tremendous precisely because so much remains to be done. But there's a lot of training, a lot of discussion to be had amongst Africans to understand that our countries are the most beautiful places with the best opportunities, because they're still brand new, still open. It's like a white sheet, like a white big piece of paper where you can write whatever you want to write. Without established systems and infrastructures, in many sectors there's more space for innovation and creation. Young Africans don't have to fit into rigid existing structures. They can design new ones that better serve their community's needs. Consider some examples that are already unfolding. In Rwanda, drones are delivering medical supplies to remote clinics, leapfrogging the need for extensive road infrastructure. In Kenya, community-owned solar microgrids are bringing electricity to villages that were never connected to the national power grid. In Nigeria, the film industry has become the world's second largest by volume, creating thousands of jobs and telling African stories to global audiences. In Ghana, a company called Farmerline is using mobile technology to give small-scale farmers access to weather forecasts, market prices, and agricultural advice, increasing their productivity and income. And there's a lot more. These innovations didn't come from following American or European models. They emerged from Africans identifying local challenges and creating solutions with available resources and technologies. The potential closing of American embassies won't stop this wave of African innovation and self-determination. If anything, it might amplify the growing chorus of voices calling for a new approach to Africa's development, one led by Africans themselves. The closing of American embassies, if it happens, won't be the end of Africa's story. It might just be the beginning of a new chapter, one written with African pens on that blank white page of possibility. What if we've been looking at this situation all wrong? What if Trump's plan to close embassies isn't a punishment or a problem, but actually a hidden opportunity for African nations? Sometimes the best things that happen to us come disguised as challenges or losses. Sometimes being forced to stand on our own is exactly what we need to discover our true strength. Think about a bird teaching its chicks to fly. At first, the mother bird brings food directly to the nest. The chicks just open their mouths, and everything they need arrives. This is comfortable, but it doesn't prepare them for independent life. Eventually, the mother bird starts pushing the chicks toward the edge of the nest, even allowing them to fall a short distance before catching them. This feels like cruelty to the chicks, as if their mother is abandoning them. But it's actually the most loving thing she can do. Without this push, they would never learn to use their wings. The relationship between powerful nations like the United States and developing countries has often resembled that early stage in the nest, provision without preparation for independence. Foreign aid, diplomatic support, and preferential trade agreements can create comfort, but also dependency. What if Trump's embassy closures, whether intended this way or not, function like that mother bird's push? What if they force African nations to spread their wings and discover they can fly on their own? This isn't to suggest that international support has no value. Partnerships, investments, and diplomatic ties remain important. But the nature of these relationships might need to change, from dependency to mutual benefit, from tutelage to collaboration. Captain Traoré's message to the African diaspora takes on new significance in this light. By urging Africans abroad to return home and contribute to building their countries, he's recognizing that Africa's greatest resource isn't its minerals or agriculture, it's its people and their talents. For decades, Africa has experienced brain drain as its most educated citizens sought opportunities abroad, often in America and Europe. This has deprived African nations of doctors, engineers, entrepreneurs, and other skilled professionals who could drive development at home. If embassy closures make it harder to emigrate to America, could this inadvertently help reverse the brain drain? Could it keep more talented Africans at home, where their skills and energy can directly benefit their communities? Similarly, if American companies reduce their presence in African markets due to diplomatic downsizing, could this create space for local businesses to grow? Could it encourage African entrepreneurs to develop local solutions rather than importing American products and services? Even in diplomacy, reduced American presence might create opportunities for African nations to strengthen relationships with each other. The African Union and regional organizations like ECOWAS could take on greater importance as forums for addressing shared challenges without external mediation. None of this means isolation is the goal. In our interconnected world, no country can thrive alone, but the nature of those connections matters tremendously. Are they balanced or one-sided? Do they respect sovereignty or impose external agendas? Do they build local capacity or create dependency? Africa has unique qualities that can't be found anywhere else. These qualities aren't just tourist attractions. They represent different ways of seeing the world, different approaches to community and problem solving, different values and priorities that might offer solutions to global challenges. What if the greatest opportunity in America's diplomatic retreat is the space it creates for these uniquely African perspectives and approaches to flourish? What if, pushed from the nest of American support and supervision, African nations discover they've had the strength to fly all along? This isn't just a story about Trump, Traoré, or US embassies. It's about all of us, about remembering who we are, protecting African unity and solidarity, and rebuilding what was broken during colonialism while fighting neo-colonialism. And if you felt anything watching this, pride, curiosity, maybe even a little fire in your chest, then don't let that feeling disappear. Subscribe to The New Tourist right now, because this isn't the last story like this we're telling, not by a long shot. Like this video so the algorithms don't bury a story the world needs to hear. Share it with your family, your friends, and your group chats. Be the reason someone else learns the truth. And if you want to go even deeper, if you want behind-the-scenes stories, early access, exclusive discussions, join our membership community. Because The New Tourist isn't just a channel anymore, it's a movement. And the story we're writing together, it's only just beginning.